Okay, I want to talk a bit about the I should Bibi case because I think it's useful for a lot of wider discussion around issues about religious freedom, persecution of minorities in Islamic countries, and the utter weakness in Western Europe of dealing with this problem. I'll specify that to Britain, although I think it's could be applied to Western Europe in general. Um, Okay, firstly, the good news is that Canada appears to have offered her asylum, or rather, she's in Canada. That's good news. I hope she can finally get some peace, and her family as well. I hope they can begin to rebuild their lives. I can't imagine the nightmare that she and her family have been through. Um, just a little recap if you're not familiar with the case. Aisha Bibi is a Pakistani Christian woman who was picking I believe it was cherries, something like that, about 8 years ago with some Muslim women, and an argument broke out over something rather trivial. But this argument then turned into accusations of blasphemy against her. And it should be said that this, more often than not, is used as a way to weaponize disputes in Pakistan, particularly against minorities. So this poor woman was dragged through the courts. She had to put up with real risk of violence against her. Um, I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful what she went through. There was points where literally thousands of men, so-called men, were demanding the blood of one woman over alleged blasphemy. That is where Islam is today. That is where Islam is. So when I hear people insist that Islam is about peace and tolerance, it's just a cruel lie. It is just a lie. So long as this goes on in conservative Islamic states, then people cannot insist, certainly not state Islam, is anything but peaceful and tolerant. Because this is a problem that is rampant across the Islamic world. Now, credit to Canada for taking her in, but it is also a moment of reflection on our shameless lack of activity. Theresa May was pushed at this on Prime Minister's Questions, which I've just watched, and she came out with a very flimsy excuse of, oh, well, our concern was she safe? We were working closely with the Pakistani authorities. No, Prime Minister, just admit that the truth of the matter is you caved into Islamist extremism. The reason we didn't accept Asia Bibi's case was because of fear of Islamist backlash. That's about it. And I think that is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to cave into them, but it's also sobering to think that is the situation that we are in. That Britain in 2019 can't give refuge to a Christian woman because Islamist hardliners within this country might retaliate. That was never the official line, by the way, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that's what's been going on here, and it's a damn disgrace. It's absolute political cowardice, and it's shameful. I thought May's answer was deflective and very weak. Um, but really, it gets into wider issues. I mean, if there's any case for offering someone asylum, surely it's a Christian whose life is being threatened over alleged blasphemy, or an atheist for that matter, or homosexuals in these backward Islamic states. But Britain and Pakistan, needless to say, have close relations. We have a big part of the Pakistani diaspora. Um, British Pakistanis are a diverse group of people like anyone else. Many of them are patriotic, but there is no question that there are Islamist tendencies in our Pakistani community. And we're in a situation which is almost Orwellian. You cannot talk about these things without some idiot smearing you as an Islamophobe or a bigot or a racist. And I find it utterly infuriating, depressing, immensely frustrating that there are people pushing this victimhood narrative of Muslims in the West. This is a situation Sometimes hate crimes do occur, and most decent people condemn them. And there are very specific laws to deal with that, as there should be. I don't think there should be laws to protect religion, but I do think there should be laws specifically about hate crimes. But that's all. It's all serious. It's bad. And the rise of neo-Nazi groups is definitely something to be concerned about, the likes of National Action and so on. But still, the establishment, for want of a better term, polite society, mainstream parties simply will not talk about these things. And it is absolutely reprehensible. It is the worst form of political cowardice to not stand up for human rights because you think it might offend someone. In my view, that's probably the worst form of political cowardice, except maybe scapegoating people who can't defend themselves. But I just find this infuriating. And there's many examples of it. The Liberal Democrat councillor who was suspended for what? Because he condemned the politicization of young girls with the hijab. He condemned regressive cultural practices like honor killings. And regarding Islam and honor killings, incidentally, I know that is a cultural thing, but there's some overlap. I know it isn't just Islamic countries where it happens, but there is strong overlap. And ultimately, what it comes down to is forced multiculturalism. Now, when I was younger, I was very naive. I thought, oh, multiculturalism, it's nice. Lots of people, lots of different cultures coming together. It's wonderful. I think we need to accept that this has been a failure. Now, both Cameron and May have alluded to that, but I don't think they have went far enough either because they still toe a politically correct line of not talking vocally about the reality of Islamic extremism. As for the so-called Liberal Democrats, this is one of the reasons I left the party. They have no right to call themselves liberal so long as they will not stand up for liberal values. I often wonder what would William Ewart Gladstone and David Lloyd George think of the Liberal Democrats today. And I think they are much more akin to the regressive left on this issue than traditional liberalism. Now, they're not as bad as the likes of the Green Party and hardcore aspects of Labour, Corbynite Labour. And their defenders will say, oh, but Vince Cable spoke out about our relations with Saudi Arabia. That's very good. But no matter what good positions they take, as long as they're punishing potential candidates for telling the truth and saying this isn't part of our values, then what the hell are your values? The Liberal Democrats, in my view, should be on the absolute forefront of this. Why am I picking on the Lib Dems? Because they call themselves Liberal Democrats. Pan Islamism is neither. They should be on the absolute forefront of tackling this scourge. And then they ask, oh, why is the far right on the rise? We need to ask why. Well, look, when I see, for example, open fascist salutes going on in Italy, of course it's concerning. I've always, my whole life, rejected blood and soil nationalism. I abhor racism. And I have never ever supported collective punishment or collective vilification of all Muslims, which is why I'm condemning what's going on in China. But we need to wake up and start telling the truth. We need to vocally, clearly condemn regressive cultural practices. Islam's a big factor there, but it isn't the only one. I also include this with any regressive practices that are deemed to be cultural diversity. We must insist that in the United Kingdom, we believe in gender equality, we believe in gay rights, we believe in freedom of expression, freedom of religion. Now, all of those things means that if you're coming from a culture where you believe someone should be violently killed for offending Islam, or you believe that a woman should have acid thrown in her face, or a woman, or in some cases men, incidentally, very occasionally you also get honor killings involving men. Um, it's a side that's not often spoken about. In fact, it was featured in the film East is East, where young men were pressured into arranged marriages. Arranged marriages should have no place in this country. And quite frankly, if British Pakistanis don't like that, then they need to go back and settle in Pakistan. We need to insist on our values. Why? Because you can be damn sure when non Muslims go to a country like Pakistan, they have to abide by the culture there. If they don't, they run risk of being charged with blasphemy or violently killed. So I am sick and tired of the double standards of Western civilization constantly having to pander to demands. We need to get assertive. We need to speak up for human rights. It's not about creating a homogenous all white society. It's nothing to do with that. In fact, some of the most vocal critics of multiculturalism are minority people because they have come from parts of the world where they have seen regressive cultural practices. You ask, for example, an Iranian Christian, do they think the British government's doing enough to tackle Islamism? We need to do a hell of a lot more. And the thing is, people might say, oh, you're being too harsh on the left or whatever, but they are trying to smear other people. Simply for making this video, they would say, oh, you're pandering to the far right. The far right rises, they're filling that vacuum because establishment parties have been absolutely gutless, shamefully gutless in speaking out about these things. Where was their condemnation of the grooming abuse? Where was their recognition of the threat of pan-Islamist extremism? I'm not blaming the security services. I think the men and women in GCHQ and other units are bodies are working around the clock, and we need to be grateful for that. We sometimes underestimate that actually. Every day there's not a terrorist attack is because these people are working around the clock. So I don't blame the security services so much as this cowardly political correctness. And I'm not saying that talking about the problem will immediately solve it, but how can you solve any problem if you can't even talk about it? It makes my blood boil because I see this as putting up a barrier to progress of anything being done. And this is not only a case of, it's nothing to do with being polite, it's to do with standing in the way of progress. And we are failing victims of this. We're failing young women who go missing because they're victims of honor killing. They're sent off to some extended family in Pakistan and then they just go missing. This is a crisis. I don't know what the statistics are, but I know it is high enough to be a serious, serious problem. But people don't talk about it because, oh, that would be talking about a minority community and it's racist. We can't do that. That's their culture. We must demand that when people live in this country, including people who are second and third generation, they respect our culture. Simple as that. And quite honestly, if that means me being charged as a racist or an Islamophobe is the price of telling the truth, so the Aisha Bibi case, I'm pleased that she's found refuge in Canada. I really hope she can rebuild her life, but she is far from unique. There are many people in Pakistan, Christians, atheists, and for that matter, Islamic minorities like the Sufis and the Ahmadis, who are persecuted beyond belief. Now, Imran Khan's government, actually, it was the Pakistani law courts that found her not guilty. But instead of immediately granting her refuge because her life was in threat, Imran Khan's government messed around, constantly kept giving false hopes that she had left the country, only for it to transpire that wasn't the case until right now. I think that we are far, far too tolerant and far too quick to pander to Islamic demands in the West. Incidentally, I've got one subscriber who said I'm obsessed with the niqab and the burqa and so on. I don't know what country you're from, Nora Ali. Okay, you've left a few comments for me. I don't know where you're from, but if you think I'm not going to speak out on these issues, you're going to be disappointed. My channel is not a blasphemy zone. In other words, if telling the truth is offensive to Muslims, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I mean, if I was a politician, I'd probably need protection for saying these things. And that's a sobering reminder of where we are. I have no time for blood and soil nationalists, and I will condemn them. But The absolutely cowardly response of Corbyn's Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party, the SNP, and a large segment of the Conservatives is absolutely shameful. Absolutely shameful. And if I didn't disagree with their positions on the EU, I would say UKIP is the only party that's actually talking about this. Well, they are. And they're smeared as racist for doing so. What establishment parties need to understand is people are sick and tired of this shackling, dishonest political correctness. Political correctness doesn't protect minorities. All it does is put up a barrier to telling the truth. It's sad, it's infuriating, and it has to change.